You're listening to Speaking Of by WFSU Public Media. Fireflies are more than just dots of light in the night sky, and they aren't even flies. They're beetles. We borrowed an excerpt from our sister podcast, Coast to Canopy, where host Rob Diaz de Villegas talks with Dave Almquist, an invertebrate zoologist. They discuss fireflies' life cycle, the diversity of the species, and how to observe them. You'll never look at a firefly flashing the same way again.
It's that time of year. When the sun gets low and we find ourselves near water, you might get lucky and see a firefly display. But which firefly species are we seeing? How many species might you find just in your neighborhood? You might be surprised. This is Rob Diaz de Villegas, and today we're speaking of fireflies. Joining me today is Dave Almquist, invertebrate zoologist and assistant data manager for the Florida Natural Areas Inventory, or FNA. Welcome, Dave.
Hello, Rob.
All right, so Dave, you're an entomologist, right? So I have to ask you this question. Are fireflies really flies?
Well, fireflies that are also called lightning bugs are not flies nor true bugs. They're actually beetles. And I am also, besides an entomologist, which is somebody who studies insects, I'm also a coleopterist, which is somebody who specializes in beetles. And fireflies are beetles. But for many years, I pretty much ignored them, in part because I thought other people were taking care of researching them in Florida, and I figured I would concentrate on other things so I wouldn't duplicate efforts. But then a few years ago, I started getting interested in them and realized how little there was known about them, and I've been chasing them ever since.
Gotcha. What sparked your interest?
I think it was a blue ghost firefly that somebody told me about up near Havana. And I quickly looked online and was like, there are no blue ghost fireflies here. They must not know what they're talking about. But I went up there, and sure enough, there were blue ghost fireflies up there, or at least some kind of a ghost. The jury's still a little bit out on which species it is. Anyway, my finding out that there was a species of beetle in Florida that I had no idea occurred in Florida, that started my interest, and then I kept searching and finding new things, and that just spurred me on even further.
Right. And so you were spurred on by finding a specific species. How many species of fireflies are there? I think a lot of us would just think fireflies were the species, right? So how many species of fireflies, say, are in Florida?
So I knew that there were more than one species, but I did not know or remember quite how many there were. And there are more than 50 and possibly as many as 60 species in Florida.
Wow. We were talking a little bit before this when we were doing the pre-production. Just in your neighborhood, how many have you found?
I think I've found 7 or 8, although one of those is not a flashing firefly, which maybe we'll get into later.
Oh, yeah.
But I think 7 or 8 right in my little neighborhood in the middle of Tallahassee.
Okay. So any one of us in Tallahassee might encounter multiple different types of fireflies. And so when they're flashing like that, I mean, what are they doing?
So most of what you see flashing, if you see fireflies anywhere, are males, and they are flying around flashing, trying to attract females. It's sort of like a dating site where they're putting themselves out there, and the females are usually hunkered down right near the ground or maybe perched a little bit up on some vegetation, depending on the species. And they're just kind of sitting there waiting. And if they like what they see, they may give a little brief response flash, letting the male know that, oh, yeah, you look good. Come over here. Different fireflies have different flash patterns, how long they flash, how long the interval is between flashes. Sometimes the shape of the flash. There are some that swoop up in a J shape when they flash. There's the ghost species. They fly just barely above the ground, and they don't flash so much as put out like a continuous glow. It almost looks like a line of glowing, and then they stop. Um, there's one that to me sort of reminds me of a Fourth of July sparkler a little bit, because instead of just a flash or a double flash, it kind of sputters as it moves. Um, there are also different colors to an extent. A little more towards, they're mainly green, but a little more towards maybe orangish almost. Some appear yellow, and then some a little more towards blue. And so the males are out there flying, trying to get females to respond to them, and that's the main reason that they flash. You, in general, unless you're looking very, very hard, you're not going to see the females. But different species flash not only their flash patterns or how bright or the interval between them or how long each flash is. Some of them are like almost instantaneous, whereas other ones are more drawn out. And then there's the ghost ones that are kind of ridiculously glowing. But something else that's characteristic, and it is characteristic of certain species, those different patterns and everything else. But another thing that's characteristic is how high they flash. Again, the ghost ones, they're right near the ground. There are some called treetop flashers, and they live up to their name, where they are way out of net reach, way in the treetops. So the height is diagnostic per species to an extent. There's a species active in my backyard right now that stays about maybe 10 feet from the ground, mostly a little bit lower, like around head height. Well, at least my head. And then there are other ones that start off low, but they will end up way up in the trees. And then there are other ones that only fly within a certain a certain height above the ground within certain parameters. The time in relation to sunset that they flash can also be very diagnostic. The main species that's active in my backyard right now starts just a little bit after sunset and pretty much is done flashing about 15 or 20 minutes later. So if you're not exactly in that right spot at that right time looking for them, you're never going to see them. There are other similar species, similar in their habits, that start right at official sunset. Like you could figure out what official sunset is by the first flash of them that you see, and they only flash for about 15 minutes. And if you think about right at official sunset, it's actually still relatively light out. So they're very hard to see unless you're really staring straight at them. So you can tell a lot from their flashes.
Right. So if you're just walking, maybe you're taking a late night walk or you're out camping and you see, a firefly, you can start thinking about these things. You could look at the color and the pattern and how high it is, right? Is this something that's easily capturable on a phone or any other sort of camera?
So it depends, because I was just talking about ones that come out very early. There are other species that do not come out until about an hour after official sunset, when it's pretty much truly dark out. And if there is no real moon and it's one of those species, I've had a very difficult time getting video on my phone of their flashes unless I could get relatively close to them. The ones that come out more around dusk when there's still a little more ambient light and stuff, those I can use my phone to record their flash patterns, which also, if you have your location setting on in your phone, then you know exactly where you took that video later on. And then you can very carefully go through the video and go, okay, this one flashes very briefly, 1 to 2 seconds apart, and looks like it was about 6 feet above the ground. And then you have a wealth of information to help you identify that firefly. Everybody's phone is different, and I don't want to get into a tutorial on phone videos. But for any video of fireflies, if you can find settings in your phone to increase the resolution as well as the frames per second, those things help a lot in taking firefly videos.
So the fireflies, they flash at different times of night in different locations and different patterns. Now, do they have a different seasonality as well, like a lot of other insects and animals, as far as when we might see them flashing?
They do, and getting back to how long they flash, with some of them only flashing for, or displaying, we'll call it, for about 15 minutes. There are others that especially the ones that come out at true dark, I've seen them at 2:30 a.m.
Hmm.
Now, why I was hiking around in the woods at 2:30 a.m., guess what? Looking for fireflies. So they fly for a very long time during the evening. So similarly, there are some fireflies that you can find during maybe most of the warmer months of the year. And then there are other species that are only active for maybe a few weeks, if that.
And so, where do we find fireflies typically? They're not everywhere. Do they favor kind of moist areas, or like where are we likely to find fireflies? Or does it vary species to species?
Definitely varies species to species. In general, they seem to be near water, not all the time, but in general. I don't know if people know it, but beetles have complete metamorphosis. And that's just a fancy term for basically being like a butterfly, as far as they have a larval stage, which is basically a caterpillar. Oh, they have an egg, then they have a larval stage, then they go into something basically like a cocoon, and then they come out as an adult. And so the adults usually only live a couple of weeks. Don't I don't want to make any unqualified statements about fireflies, because anytime you say fireflies do this, there's one that doesn't do that. And anytime you say fireflies don't do this, there's one that does it. But in general, I think most of the adults only live a couple weeks or so. The larvae, which is the sort of caterpillar stage for them, they can live for some species up to 2 years. And what they do is crawl around on the ground, under leaf litter, down in the dirt, up on trees, and they kind of look to me like a pangolin or maybe an armadillo. But if you know what a pangolin looks like, that's what a lot of them look like to me. And they are predatory. Most of them are predatory on snails and slugs and similar. The adults, um, most of the adults don't even eat at all. But then there are other adults that they like a little bit of nectar and pollen. And then there are other adults in genus Photurus have been called femme fatales. They mimic the flashes of other firefly species and draw in the males that think that it's a female of their species, and they actually eat the males.
Oh wow! So they need to be in leaf litter for up to 2 years. Talk about the importance of having that habitat preserved for them, like in your yard.
I would say that if you want to promote fireflies in your yard, that the number one thing would be don't use pesticides all over your yard, which means don't spread stuff around in your grass to kill grubs and stuff. Because if you're spreading around things that are killing grubs, it's probably going to kill firefly larvae. If you are spraying or having your yard sprayed for mosquitoes, they're going to spray right after dark, and that's right when a lot of the fireflies come up. So to me, that's the number one thing. Leaf litter is somewhat important, but they could probably find some leaf litter around the edges of your yard. If you don't want your yard to, if you don't want your lawn to have a whole bunch of leaves in it, just push some of the leaves off to the side and stuff, and they'll find them, I think. Another thing is that light pollution is somewhat of an issue, but I think it may be species specific because again, I've found about 7 species of fireflies in my neighborhood in Tallahassee. Obviously, there are streetlights all over the place, and I've watched them fly right under streetlights that were on. So I don't know how important light pollution is to them, but I think maybe more to the later flying species. Um, and it's a good idea to decrease light pollution near your house anyway, because you're pretty much drawing insects to your house and then they're going to try to crawl into your house. To me, the best way to do that is if you have a light that's on all night long that you don't want to have on a motion sensor, see if you can get a yellow light because they attract many less insects. But motion sensor lights are the best bet because they're not on all night. You still have the security of them coming on when they're needed. If someone comes in your yard or you get home with late night groceries or I don't know what, but I think those would be the two best.
So that's at night. So at night we see them, their lights sometimes very high up. During the day, we might see them and not even know what they are. What do they look like?
A picture's worth 1,000 words, and I wish I could give you a picture. But one thing that all the adults that actually become adults, One thing they have in common is that their thorax or pronotum, the second segment of insects, has a kind of hood or something or projection that comes out over their head. So if you're looking at them from the top, you won't actually see their head. You'll just see the edge of their thorax most of the time, and unless they're moving around. But if they're just kind of sitting there during the daytime, you'll see that hood come out, or you'll see their head come out from under that hood when they start moving around. And hood isn't quite the right term, but that's what it reminds me of. Is sort of like a beetle hoodie.
Right, right. And then for anyone listening too, we'll have photos on the WFSU Ecology blog. That's wfsu.org/ecology blog, which will go along with this podcast, and we'll have plenty of visuals. So now I want to shift gears a little bit from our neighborhoods to out in the forest. I know, I photograph bees a lot myself, and I find there's certain bees I find in my house, and then I go out in the forest and I find sometimes that there's some really cool specialized bees, or sometimes even kind of rare bees. And so, is it the same with fireflies?
Yes, I'm pretty proud of having found as many species as I have within Tallahassee in my neighborhood. I think only one of those may be somewhat uncommon. Um, but yes, if there are species that we know relatively little about, but they definitely occur in kind of more rare habitats and more pristine habitats, basically. There's one, I think it's called the pointy-lobed firefly.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make sure. Yes, pointy-lobed firefly. I'm pretty sure that's the one that I looked up, and it seems from the little knowledge that we have that it seems to like a marshy area, maybe a cypress swampy area, right next to some very dry sandhill type of habitat. We at FNA are tracking that species, which means we try to gather information about it and gather locations for it and things like that. But it hasn't been seen in decades. So I would love to find that. But that's one example. There's the Florida intertidal firefly, Micronaspis floridana. It's only found in salt marsh or salt marsh slash mangrove habitats, and only in peninsular Florida. Although I really want to go down and look in some of the salt marshes down near St. Mark's, because I wonder if maybe it's hiding out there just because nobody's looked for it.
Right.
There's also an ant-loving scrub firefly, which the females do not fly. Their wings and their elytra, the elytra for beetles are basically what you think of as sort of the shell, but they kind of split that apart and then their flying wings come out from under it. So the ant-loving scrub firefly, which is Pleiatomedes needhami, the females are flightless and they live in ant nests, and they come out at night and glow. And the males, which do fly, come by and they glow also. They don't really flash.
Hmm.
And they only live in scrub habitat in the peninsula, and scrub habitat is very, very dry and sandy. So we were talking about leaf littered habitats and wetlands and stuff like that. This is like the opposite end of the spectrum where, well, let's see, we need some humidity and we don't have leaf litter because it's very sandy. So we're going to go hang out in an ant nest.
So interesting. And so a lot of these places too, yeah, by a salt marsh, as the sun is setting, might be kind of a time where there's a lot of mosquitoes as well. Maybe they're not observed because it's like a hard, not always a fun place to be for some of these places. It sounds like.
And no-see-ums.
Oh yeah.
No-see-ums can be deadly sometimes. And you don't want to put on repellent in general, because if you have to get close to the fireflies to try to catch one, you don't want them to say, "Oh, he stinks, I'm going to fly away."
Right, right. And so you mentioned FNA and tracking species. So explain that part of your job. So what does FNA do as far as tracking rare and sensitive species in Florida?
Well, what we try to do is we try to pay attention to the ones that are of the most conservation need. And sometimes that's difficult, especially with insects, to figure out because of the lack of information. Not enough people go out looking for insects, not enough people go out and collect insects. And while I definitely don't like killing insects, collecting insects is a necessity. Really, a lot of insects, we would know a lot more about them, and they would be we be better able to protect them if we had more specimens of them.
Right. But that, I mean, you're talking about responsible collection of specimens by trained
Oh yes,
professional
not
people. Yeah.
not just going out and collecting everything or canopy fogging or anything like that. No, but just collecting so that you can positively identify them. One of the problems with fireflies is even if you have all of the flash data of the time after sunset and how high and how often and everything else, and you have really good pictures. Say you're using a really nice digital SLR with a macro lens on it, and you get really good close-ups. There are still some fireflies that you cannot identify, even with excellent pictures and information like that. And people have been delving into their DNA lately and finding out that, oh wow, there are some that the only way you can tell them apart is DNA.
That's true of a lot of
Anyway,
insects. Yeah.
getting back to what FNA does as far as tracking rare species is, we try to pay attention to the ones that are of the most conservation concern, and we rank them with various conservation related attributes, and then we try to keep track of their locations or populations. We call them occurrences, and an occurrence is very similar to a population. And so that way we can say, okay, well, this species has only four known populations. Maybe there are some we haven't found, but that's pretty rare. Whereas this other species, well, it's got 20 or 30 populations, so it's not as rare. Or, well, this one has 10 populations, but they're all in a tiny little area, like only in the Western Panhandle or something. Whereas another species may have 10 populations spread out through the state. And so it seems much more likely that there would be undiscovered populations, if that makes sense.
Are there any that are Florida endemic, meaning that they're only found in Florida?
Any fireflies specifically? Yes. Let's see, the Everglades brown-winged firefly, which is Photurus floridana. That's another one that has not been seen in decades. And the ant-loving scrub firefly that I was talking about before are both endemics. There are probably other endemics that I just don't have on my radar right now.
FNA only has so much staff, right? And there's only so many biologists working in the state of Florida. And I know how I met you and we started working together was a segment on you use sometimes citizen science data. So talk about how you use data collected by ordinary citizens.
So we have been relying more and more on iNaturalist. Again, there are a lot of insects that cannot be told apart from photographs, but there are a good number that can be. We get a lot of valuable data from iNaturalist in similar places now.
You can catch the rest of that conversation on the Coast to Canopy podcast. Also, Dave shared a bunch of photos of different firefly species and links for those of you who want to identify the fireflies in your yard. You can find all of that at wfsu.org/ecologyblog.